Welcome back, everyone. We hope you're well fed. We hope you're well rested because it's time for tennis, and not just tennis, Steve. Canadian tennis. It's been about 2 years since we had a WTA event north of the border. The men also have waited that long. They're in Toronto. The women are in Montreal. Are you excited? Are you ready? I see you've got your hat on there. You're ready to go. You're took.
I am excited. I was a little more excited before the withdrawals list came out last week, but I'm sure they weren't thrilled about the 2-year wait to get back to Canada, and then the Olympics being a week and a bit before. So yeah, look, it's going to be interesting. It's nice to see the North American hardcourt swing in relatively normal fashion compared to what we saw last year with the bubbles and what was taking place there in a bit more severe fashion. So yeah, it's good to get back into the swing of things.
And before we do, we just want to mention, now there is only the two of us. Unfortunately, my favorite host of Eat Sleep Tennis is not here because it's her birthday. It's Candace's birthday. We don't know how old she is because we're too polite to ask. We gave her the day off. She's somewhere, who knows, hanging out, having a good time. I forget what she said she was doing today, but it sounded pretty good. So happy birthday, Candace. Make sure that you go on and you find her and you give her some love. Let me just double check. I think she's got an underscore in there somewhere. Yep, at Candace Hair like the rabbit with an underscore there at the end. Send her some love. It's her birthday. We gave her the day off. Anything nice you want to say to Candace, Steve, before we jump in?
Well, besides obviously happy birthday, look, no one would want to spend their birthday talking to us about tennis, so it's more than justified, I think.
Or anything, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Fair cool. But no, very, very happy birthday to Candace.
All right, let's get into it. We'll start with the men's draw, Steve. What do you think? I don't know how you organize the slides. You're back driving this time.
We'll start with the men's, and then you can finish on a high with the WTA draws.
It's always just the best. It's always more interesting because you look at these draws, and this one actually I think is pretty solid here. I mean, Medvedev is the favorite here in the market, which makes sense. I mean, he's the best player here. He does have to play Sinner, but Sinner coming off a long week. I think that'll still be an exciting match. Hurkacz can maybe do something for him. You look at that first quarter, I think it is maybe a little more challenging than Medvedev maybe expected coming in here and given some of the other quarters. But, I mean, do you see anybody knocking Med out off of that first section?
No, but it's tough. It's tough compared to some of the other quarters, as you said. I think Sinner obviously, just has come off that title a couple of hours ago. Has the advantage of having the first round bye here. But yeah, look, when you look at, I guess, the names here that are playing in that first round, you look at Evans, Bublik, Fritz, Brooksby, Nishikori, they're all capable, I think, at their top level of causing a bit of grief to some of these seeded players. You got Hurkacz, who didn't look great in Tokyo, but is obviously coming off that semi-final in Wimbledon, which is, the best fortnight of his career, you could argue. And Alex de Minaur has played one match since he, was diagnosed with COVID. So, he struggled, I think, after being a setup to Steve Johnson. So I think there's the potential, I think, for some unseeded players here to get through to the quarterfinal or to that third round. But it's just a matter of, I think if Medvedev is at a level close to his best, he should be getting through in that first quarter. What are you looking at? And are there any names, I guess, that are standing out as upset potential?
It's tough. Again, Sinner's probably the best player in this quarter, but coming off a long week, I'm not really sure what he's going to have in the tank. Hurkacz continues just outperform my expectations, so maybe him. And then you have that Kekmanovic-Nishikori match. It's bad conditions for Kekmanovic. He generally likes being either indoors or on a faster surface here. Maybe Nishikori can grind out a couple matches here and take a set off Medvedev or something, but it feels like I really have to talk myself into someone. I mean, there's this Brooksby fellow that everyone was all excited about last week. Is he any good?
He is, but again, you're asking a player that hasn't played a lot at the top level to then, again, back up off a pretty impressive week last week. Gets a tricky first round match with Basilashvili, but it's, as you said, there's some interesting names there, but you do really need to kind of convince yourself, I think, getting through. Hurkacz, as you said, he's won 2 tournaments in North America this year already. So, he's obviously comfortable playing in the conditions to an extent. So, you can maybe make a case, but I think if you've got Medvedev back in relatively comfortable conditions, he's not going to melt on the court like he did in Tokyo. last week or a week and a half ago. So yeah, it's hard to make a strong case, but at the same time, as you said, it's a competitive quarter, so it's hard to get super excited, I think, by the outright price on Med.
Yeah, he's at around 3-1. I'm happy to pass on that. You can just kind of bet a match to match and probably do just as well if you really want to. So Medvedev there in the first quarter. Maybe we jump down into the second quarter where I guess Andrei Rublev has to be relieved to finally not be in the same quarter as Novak Djokovic. What do you think?
Definitely. I mean, it helps that Novak's not here, but it's nice. I think this is a really good spot for him. I think if you had to pick of the seeded players that you wanted to be closest to in the draw, I think Garin is probably one that you'd be pretty happy to pick, and another one is probably Monfils. So he's got two of them in the quarter here. But, I think when you look through this section, I think you're looking at Rublev, I think, as a starting point, and then working down in order of the draw. I think, unless John Isner, if he serves exceptionally well, you kind of have to keep an eye on. He can get through on tie breaks. But outside of that, it's probably Korda or Shapovalov down the bottom there that are going to make a run. I think Dennis made a run here a couple of years ago as a player outside the top 100 and made it to the semifinals. I think he beat Nadal along the way. So that's his first real significant tournament playing back at home in his home country. So he's one obviously to keep an eye on here. But I think if you had to pick over the extended body of form and particularly the hard court form, it's very hard to go past Rublev here. But can you provide an alternate name out of this section that you're liking?
I think Garin might be a little more competitive. He played well here last time, which is actually his first time here. These are slower courts, but who knows? I mean, Isner's here. He's always capable of kind of serving his way through a draw if he's playing well. I think Rublev is the best player in this quarter. And I think it'll come down to probably him versus Shapovalov. Korda is kind of sneaky, and there's a lot of smart tennis people that I know that have kind of been whispering his name and pointing him out in that spot. I think that if he can take advantage of Shapovalov, who has a bye. So these buys are interesting because I think in some ways, I don't know about you, but I think if I was a tennis player, I'd prefer having a first round match here. Give me somebody that I can kind of get some reps in against. Not that, everyone's not a professional here, but whoever they'd put against Shapovalov here in the first round, he'd be a huge favorite, I assume. And you might almost rather have the reps maybe than the rest. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I agree. I think with that in particular, if ranking points and money aren't a major issue for you as a top level player, I think there are probably a few players here that would like to have that time on court. Particularly, I'm not saying that anyone in this top half is using this as a warm up tournament for perhaps the US Open in a couple of weeks, but there might be a name a little bit further down that might be looking for just some time on court. So it's certainly a possibility here. I think when you look at this section, it's going to be, I think it's going to be interesting to see who can actually put together and string together a couple of wins in this second quarter, because it does look a little bit more wide open than the top.
I think it comes down to Rublev or Shapovalov, whoever's having the best week. Again, maybe Korda or Garin could surprise, but I picked Rublev. Could easily see Shapovalov there.
Yep, and I'm the same.
All right, ready to jump down into the bottom half of the draw?
Let's.
Third quarter, Casper Ruud there at the top. Tsitsipas down at the bottom of the quarter. Karatsev, Felix Auger-Aliassime. Kind of a fun quarter, but I think it's going to be pretty competitive, and I like Karatsev's chances. I think that we're back on hard courts, which is where he was kind of ripping people apart earlier this year. They're going to be slow enough where I think, maybe it sets up nice for Tsitsipas. It's hard to figure out Tsitsipas. I mean, he seems to play better on slower courts, and you'd think somebody kind of with his game and serve wouldn't, but maybe he's just maybe it's a Kvitova thing almost, where it just has enough of a game for it to be good here. I mean, I think it does come down to the winner of Tsitsipas, Karatsev, and I kind of like Karatsev, honestly, but what do you think?
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny quarter because when I first looked at it, I thought, Casper Ruud's at the top there, coming off, 3 weeks of clay court titles, and I was keen to kind of figure out a spot to maybe try and get involved here. But then, Felix has been a little bit up and down, and he's still a little bit hard to trust, specifically speaking from an outright perspective. He could, play out of his mind the first couple of weeks, but you're going to get a little bit edgy, I think, as you get closer to the weekend. And then when you look through the form of Karatsev, it does kind of, there are peaks and troughs with it, particularly over this year. Obviously, the big peak being the Australian Open earlier in the year, and then Belgrade, I think, on the clay. So I'm interested to see how he goes now in terms of trying to pick up where he left off on the hard courts. He is going to be another one, I think, that, I think he'll either make a run out of this section or he'll lose to the winner of Khachanov Norrie. Like, I don't feel like there's
That's
any kind
fair.
of... And I'm kind of looking at it as if he beats Norrie or Khachanov, I still think he's going to be a relatively decent outright price there. And I'm hoping that he kind of plays early in those seeded players playing to be able to maybe look to jump in a little bit on his outright a little bit later. But I just want to kind of see him back on the hard court. Tsitsipas it's really hard to gauge. I think, he looked pretty poor late in that match against Humbert in Tokyo. And then it looks like he could be playing him again here first up on court. And he just has that kind of look about him that I don't know if he's still processing what happened at Roland Garros, but he just hasn't kind of shown anything, to that level since. And I think Medvedev did the same a little bit after the Australian Open. And look, I think it's going to be interesting to see where he goes, but I don't see any value in his price. And there's the comment here of that he did roll his ankle against Humbert, but he did also then go on and play and look pretty comfortable in the mixed as well. I think he played with Zachary and made it through to the quarterfinals, and he didn't look too hindered there. But again, it's going to be a full week again, and it's going to be a tough little spot here for him.
I think so. It's like you said. I mean, if he comes out and puts it together, he's the best player in this quarter. But I do think that it might be tough for him to put together a little form. That Humbert Sonego winner, I think, will challenge him a bit. And you're right, Karatsev might get knocked off, but it is kind of like you said. I mean, if he's playing well here and he gets past Tsitsipas, I have no problem with him being in the final at this point. I mean, we'll get into the fourth quarter in just a second, but there's not too many challenging players before the final besides Tsitsipas for Karatsev.
Yeah. Could you maybe make a case? Look, maybe Ruusuvuori looked pretty good in qualifying. You could maybe get through that little top patch there and maybe catch Felix off guard, maybe in that second round. I'd have to have a look. I haven't looked at his outright odds since the qualifiers got placed, but it'd be interesting to see kind of, if he can finally string together what a lot of people have actually been hoping for from him this year.
Well, say our buddy Zane wants to know, I mean, are we counting out Khachanov here? I kind of think he loses that first match. These are great conditions for Norrie. And then it just gets really tough from there. So I guess I am ruling him out. How about you, Steve?
It kind of comes back to that comment I made before that I think, if Norrie's tough first up, and I think, in terms of what Norrie's been able to produce, in relatively similar conditions, while Khachanov has been over in Tokyo and winning that silver, it's hard. I think I'm probably going to give the edge to Norrie in that first one. But again, I think, as I said before, that maybe that Karatsev is in that spot to be able to, make a decent run if he wins that second round match. I'd probably also look to the same that if it was Khachanov or Norrie that comes out of there, that to look at the prices and to see what's involved there. Because I think, that is probably the most difficult pocket of three in this draw with a whole bunch of buys in it. So I think whoever comes out of that is going to be in a really good position to not only challenge Tsitsipas or challenge Auger-Aliassime or Ruud or whoever comes out of that third quarter, but also anyone who comes out of that fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, let's get into the fourth quarter. We've touched on a little bit here. Mr. Rafael Nadal, playing his second tournament in a long time, did not look great. Dropped a set in his first match, which he did win, and then lost in 3 in his second match. Again, kind of a warm-up tournament for him, I assume, and maybe these will be a little better conditions. He does have if he's playing well, he walks through this quarter, but he has a question mark, and you go up and down the list. Is there anybody you'll feel confident about, Steve, like at all, if they were at any point in this draw, let alone here?
There's not a lot, I don't think. Like, if we break it down and we kind of work our way through, so we've got Diego, who is limited on hard courts, but it's a little bit slower, and that does bring him back into the equation a little bit. Benoit Paire is a match-to-match prospect only because you can't trust what he's going to do across a full week. Mackenzie McDonald just played one of the tournaments of his career, and he's probably going to be a little bit tired coming in here, as well as he is playing. Pospisil has underachieved this year, you would probably say. Tommy Paul falls into the Nick Kyrgios bracket of the golf between the best and the worst is hard to kind of gauge from an outright perspective. Bautista Agut hasn't been in any form, but look, did play well in North America, late last year and could, maybe fashion a run here, with the right draw. Dimitrov is either out of form or injured or both at any given time at the moment. Nick Kyrgios, you can't trust more than match to match. Opelka is so reliant on his first serve. Lloyd Harris is still a little bit inconsistent, I think, for his age, but is improving. I don't think Schneer's in outright discussions. And then you've got Nadal, who's probably treating it as a tune-up for the US Open. So how much is this?
That's, we talked about this a little bit on Net Worth earlier, and we kind of settled on Schwartzman, who has been playing a little bit better.
Yeah. I'm looking to settle on Bautista Agut, but the only reason I'm settling on him is because I think he is going to be able to match it more with either a Tsitsipas or a Auger-Aliassime or a Karatsev coming out of the third quarter. If you had to ask me who was going to win the quarter, I would probably be more inclined to edge maybe towards Schwartzman. But I think who's got more chance of going on and winning the whole tournament, I'd probably go Bautista Agut. But I'm saying that off next to no form from him over the last little period. And you just kind of sit here waiting and waiting for him to kind of turn back up. And I just don't know whether going back to North America, where I think he did play some pretty good tennis, particularly that week before the US Open last year. I feel like he had a real tight match with Novak there. Like, I think, if there was ever a time and ever a draw for him to kind of find his way back into some form, this is potentially the one.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think that's all we can do is just kind of wait and see. And that's part of the reason from kind of a value perspective, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, that I was targeting that third quarter, because if you can get out of there, it's kind of smooth sailing until the final. And, Medvedev will probably be there, and that kind of is trouble for anyone. But that's where the opportunity is for me.
And I think it's the thing. And you look at the odds and you go, look, if Nadal does get through all of this, then fair play to him. Well done. But you can look at the entire conversation around himself, Novak and Federer. No one's talking about how many times they've won the Rogers Cup. It's not really... It's not high on his achievement list at the moment. He's using everything in this next little period. And why he's playing this tournament, I think, as opposed to, I don't think he's on the list for Cincinnati, is to, I think, have that bit of an extended break between, playing here and then playing in the US Open.
Yeah, makes perfect sense to me.
Shall we jump into our picks?
Let's.
Now, I'll kick things off with my ace for the tournament, and I have gone for Andrei Rublev. And I did talk about it a little bit, I guess, before when we were going through the draw. I think when we look at what he's got in that second quarter, and you can kind of make a case of, maybe Shapovalov, you could make a case for. I think they will meet in that quarterfinal, and it's probably going to be whoever plays better on the day. But I think in the slower conditions, I think it probably does suit Rublev a little bit more when you look at the greater body of form. But I think when you look at that and look through the top, I think these are the tournaments I'm more inclined to kind of get involved with Rublev compared to Grand Slams, just because he hasn't quite shown, I guess, that ability to finish off in the bigger tournaments as yet. So it will be interesting to see how he goes. But I think looking at the draw and looking at those first couple of rounds, I think the only obstacle really for him is maybe if he gets tie-breaked out by Isner. Otherwise, he should be in that final 8 at the absolute least. Who have you gone for as your ace?
The guy I expect to beat Rublev. I think you're right. The winner of the semifinal in the top half takes it. And I've got Medvedev winning there. I think that although his quarter might be a little tougher, there are some question marks about some of those better players. I think he, as I've said, is the best player in this field. So happy to take him as my pick to win.
Now, I've got a comment from earlier on, which I just wanted to circle back to when we came to this. I'm liking Medvedev over Nadal for who would reach further at $2.80.
I'd hammer that. I would bet a whole bunch of money, but I asked where that is. It's at 1xBet. I don't know how much you can get down on that, but that's an easy bet for me. That seems like a huge edge. That should be the other way around.
Totally. Yep, and I would probably tend to agree with that. Alrighty, shall we move on to the value selections? How about you? Who's your value pick?
Hinted at this a little bit. Mr. Karatsev is 28-1, and I think he is really the only person kind of in the double digits or even above 20 that has a real shot. Yes, he has Tsitsipas there in the third round, and even the second round match, whether it be Norrie or Khachanov, could be a challenge. But if he is playing tennis like he was earlier in the year, I think he has all the skill and can run hot enough to get through that quarter, get through that part of the draw, and be in the final. So 28-1 is a really nice number for me.
Yep, that sounds more than fair enough. And like as I said, you're probably looking to play that outright position at a big price compared to getting involved maybe in that second round match with either Norrie or Khachanov. I think that's probably the smart way to play.
Yeah, I looked at it. The line even against Tsitsipas, he was only plus 155 or 2.55 when they played Monte Carlo, and that was on clay. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and kind of looking at that as a good way of trying to figure out what the line would be against Tsitsipas in that third round. I thought there's actually a lot more value again in that 28-1 versus trying to go match by match based on that.
Yep, definitely. And look, my value pick, probably figured it out. I started my sales pitch while I was talking about the fourth quarter. Is Roberto Bautista Agut? I think I saw mid-30s to 1 before. And as I said, it's probably that case of, again, a little bit like yours with Karatsev. He's either going to go out early, he'll probably lose to Tommy Paul, or I think he can actually make his way through and is the biggest genuine threat, I think, for a number of those other players in the bottom half if you can find it and rediscover some of that form. I think the slower conditions help him. I think the return to hard court helps him. It's just about a matter of figuring out whether he does kind of regain that confidence quickly enough or not. But I'll probably be keeping an eye on, I think, his outright odds, maybe looking into Cincinnati and some of those other spots there, because he is going to be a tough out as we get closer to the US Open. And I think he's always a relatively difficult out, particularly on hard court in the best of 5 arena. But he has struggled a little bit. He struggled at the Australian Open. He struggled at Roland Garros. And I think he's one of those players that has struggled a little bit, I guess, with the adjustment and the bubbles and what's been going on over the course of the last 12 months or so. So we'll see what happens there. We've both got the same unforced error. Do you want to chat about it? We'll be quick.
It's like what you said. I mean, it's Rafael Nadal. You kind of give him a pass for this week. Yes, it's a big event. Maybe last week was the warm-up event, but he sure did not look too warmed up. And on some level, I wonder if he is someone that he took almost most of last year off. I wonder if that was the first time he'd ever taken time off in his life. He's kind of looked at his career and been like, gee, maybe I'll go do some other stuff besides kill myself playing tennis over and over again. There is that little bit of grain of thought in the back of my head, but we'll see. I mean, I'm sure he'll snap himself in form and be competitive come U.S. Open time, but giving him a pass this week.
Yeah, and I am the same, having him as my unforced error. And I think, when you add to it, when you look at his comments, I think it was after his win against Jack Sock, where he said his fitness seemed okay, but he was still getting pain in his foot. So I'm not particularly keen on him in the outright. And then I've also got him as overvalued because I think he is one of those players that may fall into that category of, I wouldn't be surprised to wake up one morning and he's withdrawn. I think if he has a long match in here somewhere and we get later to the week and we're backing up quickly, I just don't know if he's in that position to kind of, I don't think he wants to jeopardize a couple of weeks down the track. And I think he is playing the long game a little bit. So he's my overvalued player. Who have you got as your overvalued player?
The guy I picked to win, Mr. Medvedev. He's right around 3-1, 3.5 to 1 to win this event. 3-1 is what I'm looking at right now. And he should be the favorite, but like 4-1, 5-1, somewhere in that range. It's really tough, I think, for books to price this with Nadal and Tsitsipas and Rublev being there. So as much as I think he wins, I'm not putting any money behind it.
And look, I appreciate that you've done that because now if he wins, you can gloat with your little banner of your ace pick. And if he loses, then you've got your overvalued. So you've hedged your bets there quite well.
It's not as good as the time I picked Novak for all 4, but getting there.
Yeah. Progress. We're just leading into the US Open as well. We can't get it all right. You don't want to go too early.
Absolutely not.
Shall we head to Montreal?
Indeed, we shall. To what is a wide open field. We had a couple names in the last one, but I was talking to Steve before this. I had a list of almost 20 people that I think could win this tournament. We'll start in the first quarter. Aryna Sabalenka is our top seed. She's the favorite to win this week. Azarenka is our seed down there at the bottom. Sakkari and Keys in the middle. You see Yastremska, Sloane Stephens, Paula Badosa, Kudermetova, and Putintseva in here. Just a really tough quarter overall. I think it comes down to the winner of the Sabalenka-Badosa match. If Sabalenka's in form, she probably continues to blitz through fields like this as she's done all year. But I think Badosa in these conditions can be competitive in that match. So that's kind of how I see the quarter going. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think that's probably the case there. Yeah, Badosa Sabalenka is probably going to set this up unless Yastremska has finally found a way to find form of a year or two ago. And when you look through, there are some impressive names there. Madison Keys burned me last week on a individual match play against Zhang, so I don't think she's got the consistency there. But I think this is that type of thing. It's a tournament. It's just a step below Grand Slam level. It's kind of the perfect area, I think, one, for Sabalenka to play relatively well, and two, looking at this quarter, for Azarenka to kind of use it as a bit of a tune-up as well for, she's got some points to defend, I think, with Cincinnati having made she won that, didn't she?
I believe she did.
The one that Osaka pulled out of the final. I'm trying to think. There was that one in the bubble. Yeah. That was all played in New York. I think she won it via walkover, and then they met again in the US Open final, didn't they?
Something like that.
Yeah, I think looking outside of that, maybe Sakkari if she can make a little bit of a run, but I think if Sabalenka is good enough, I think she should be getting out of this little section here.
The two of the names you mentioned, Azarenka and Keys, generally don't play this tournament or play very well. They kind of come here, show up, play a match, and then run to Cincinnati as quickly as possible. So you do look at some of the other names. Sakkari, I think, definitely could advance through the bottom half here and be in that quarterfinal. But again, I think Sabalenka or even Badosa will kind of be able to beat her there. So we'll see what Sakkari can do. She's getting a lot of respect this week, down to like 15-1, which is probably as low as she's been in a while, and especially in this quality of field. So any other thoughts in the first quarter?
No, I'm happy to move on to the second, which seems to have a lot of qualifiers.
It does, which is kind of fun, I think, in a way here. You look through, we've got Pliskova as our seed with Muguruza there. Van Uytvanck is our qualifier. Martin Sova, Anisimova there. That should be a really fun first-round match. Mahova's down there with Dodan, another qualifier. But you've also got Rybakina. Ostapenko's in there. Tormo was a really nice hardcourt player early this year. This is, I think, a really competitive quarter. As I start to look through it, I think Mahova might be in one of the easier spots in kind of this draw. So I was kind of pulled towards her name, and I've got her actually winning this quarter, even though, if Muguruza is there or Rybakina is there playing good tennis, she's in trouble probably.
I think, in that top section there, Mahova would be the one I would gravitate to. We talked a little bit about that, the value of the first round the lack of value, I guess, in the first round buy in the men's. But I think, going the other way, Anisimova actually getting some wins and time on court and qualifying, I think is going to be huge for her here. So I think if you look through it, I actually think if she can find and regain some of that form, she's probably the one that challenges Mahova the most out of that section. I think Mahova's shown that she can beat Pliskova. I don't think there's anyone else there that's really going to be a genuine major threat, and she should be favourite in most of the matches that she steps on court. And then, you flip to the bottom. I mean, I selfishly would like a Rybakina Sorribes Tormo second round just to see what on earth happens with that. But look, there's a few interesting names there that can cause an upset, but it depends on which Muguruza turns up. Is it the one that, does she come out all guns blazing and play really, really well? Or do we see another so-so week from her?
Yeah, it's tough to really pin that down. It's like I kind of said at the beginning, there's just so many names here. I mean, even Martin Sova, if she takes care of Anisimova, could make kind of a run here. All those qualifiers look dangerous. If Donna Vekic can find any form, again, Karolina Pliskova coming off. She did get a couple matches in Tokyo under her belt, so got some feel for hard court after finishing second there. And then Muguruza, man, she's just, I think she gets a little too much respect in the betting markets, but is always a threat to win probably any event she's in. So we'll see if she can put it together. Who did you actually have coming out of this quarter?
I had either, now that the qualifiers have been kind of put into this position, so I did have Mahova, but I'm slightly considering a very, very minor spot on Anisimova at some longer odds there. I would be more inclined to get involved in Rybakina if she hadn't played Tokyo and then last week as well. I think she's just played a lot of tennis lately, and that's my worry there. I'm trying to stay out of that section from Rybakina to Muguruza though, because there is some up and down tennis in that little section there. So I think I'm happy to go to the top there and try and find a way to get Pliskova beaten. I think might be a little bit easier.
And that's what I liked about Mahova, and I had her coming out. So makes sense to me. Any other thoughts before we jump into the third?
Nope, let's keep on moving.
Kvitova, Svitolina, and a bunch of stuff there in the middle. This quarter was so tough for me. I had so many different names. I mean, Svitolina is probably in the best form and the best spot here, but it could be a good opportunity for Coco Gauff to kind of make a run through here. So just a lot of names, like even somebody like Magda Linette is playing really nice hardcore tennis lately, and Kvitova just seems out of sorts and not quite herself. So I think it really could be anybody. I mean, what do you see?
I agree with you. And look, for anyone who's been listening across the course of the year, very early on, I did say that I was going to be avoiding as much as I can the outrights on Elise Mertens and the outrights on Alina Svitolina, just because I've been disappointed too many times in quarterfinals and semifinals and finals to be able to actually justify continuing to go down those paths. Naturally, as a result of that, and I think looking at it, I think Coco is a good play here. I'd be more inclined to go in the outright than the particular head-to-head matchups through those first couple of rounds. And a lot of that comes down to a little bit, like I said before, de Minaur didn't look great after coming out from being testing positive to COVID. And I think, was Coco in the same boat? She missed the Olympics because of that.
I believe so.
So I'd be, I'm keen here more so at the outright probably than the match to match. But I think she has the tools to be able to beat Svitolina, and I think she has the tools to beat anyone out of that top section. If I had to pick one of Svitolina, Mertens, or Kvitova, I'd probably go with Mertens.
Yeah.
With so much confidence, as you can tell.
It's Svitolina or Coco, I think, for me. Again, Coco, with possibly being a little hampered physically, could be trouble. I mean, if Kvitova's going to find any form, this is it, but I don't know. Can't feel great about it. That's the unfortunate part, because even Svitolina, because she did finish bronze, she's now less than 20-1. It's just tough. So I do have Svitolina coming out, but like you said, can't feel great about it. And speaking about not feeling great, Simona Halep's back. Bianca Andreescu also back, we think. I mean, Halep's playing her first tennis since injuring her back in Rome. Andreescu has been in and out of events kind of all year and is back here. There's a bunch of other fun names in the middle, too. I mean, Leila Fernandez, you see Kasatkina, who's playing well, coming off a final here. Ons Jabeur, Pavlyuchenkova, who's had a nice year. Pegula, I like quite a bit. You still have Halep. You still have Andreescu. I mean, what do you do here, Steve?
It's a great question. I think I've tossed and turned on this one a little bit, and I've written different things multiple times, but I think you pick an unseeded player from the top part of this quarter and an unseeded player from the bottom half of this quarter, or Jabeur, and hope that they fight it out in a quarterfinal. It's hard. We haven't seen Halep, and I think the last two times I've backed Halep in an outright market, she's hurt herself. I think it was Miami, and whichever tournament was at Rome, wherever it was, she actually hurt herself. That were the last two times I've backed her. So I'm going to do her a favor and look elsewhere. Good. Andreescu, I'll talk about maybe in a little bit, I think, around her and what my thoughts are around her. But, Kasatkina's put together a decent week, as has Danielle Collins. They're going to have to back up pretty quickly and get north of the border. But yeah, Pavlyuchenkova's best tennis hasn't come on the hard courts this year. So maybe it is Jabeur. Maybe she can make a run here.
Who knows? I mean, I picked Andreescu. I don't feel great about it, but we've seen her come and off of no tennis whatsoever, snap into form. She made it all the way to the final in Miami this year. We've seen her win, I think, even this tournament off a long break. She's going to get worked around a little bit. She's going to be challenged here, but she's the best hardcourt player in this field unless Sabalenka puts it together for the entire tournament, and she doesn't have to worry about Sabalenka until the final. It's one of those bets I've been clicking on and unclicking all day. She's 13-1 some places, 14-1 other places. Maybe there's value in that. I just don't know, and I guess I'm going to wait to see with her, but she is my pick to win the tournament, and we'll talk about that again a little bit some more. But we'll see what happens. I mean, again, there's so many names that you could pull out of this quarter and the last quarter coming out of this bottom half. It really is one of the more wide open draws I can remember in what is generally a wide open WTA.
Yeah. I think if you're asking me to pick right now and I had to make a call of what I'd do with this quarter, I would back both of Pegula and Jabeur.
I backed one of those.
Well, that's half the battle.
Pegula. Jabeur, I don't know. Maybe she can put it together. It's just, man, that's a tough spot.
Is it though?
We'll see. I mean, if Kasatkina can get there in enough time,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to have to play Andreescu that early, I guess.
Very cool. Alrighty. Shall we get into our picks for this wide open tournament? What could go wrong here? Who is your ace for the tournament, Alex?
Just gave this away. It is Bianca Andreescu. You look through, I think the two best players really are her and Sabalenka. I love Sabalenka, as everybody knows. She's one of my favorite players. She just continues to play with too little margin, shot to shot, for me to get excited to pick her to win tournaments. So Andreescu, it's hard courts. You remember 2 years ago, before she took off 2020, we were talking about Osaka versus Andreescu, how many Grand Slam finals we're going to see with the two of them. Are they just going to play every Australian and U.S. Open together for the next 10 years? And then she took this big break, and she's kind of struggled, but she was not terribly healthy or in great physical shape and not getting injured when she made those deep runs. So we've seen her do it before. What the heck? I got to pick somebody, so I'll go with her.
And I've gone with the other one. So I've gone for Sabalenka. And I feel like also I needed to actually pick Sabalenka on a show that I'm actually on, so I can justify why I'm making such a silly decision. And again, like as I touched on, I think when we were talking about that first quarter, it's not a Grand Slam, so I'm not as worried about her kind of tightening up late in the tournament, as we've seen a couple of times over the last couple of years. And I think it's a really good spot for her. I think when you look through the draw specifically, and when we go back and touch through, Yastremska Stevens, I don't think either of them are going to be a major threat. It's going to be more if Sabalenka wants to win and plays well, she's going to win most of those matches through that top quarter, and probably as well, kind of going into that semi-final. I think Mahova's probably the biggest threat to her, because I think she's not too bad against the other power hitters, with Muguruza and Pliskova being the bigger names there, and even Rybakina. So I think it's a great spot for her. She could just get power hitter after power hitter here. She could get Yastremska, Keys, Kudermetova, or maybe it's an Azarenka, and then maybe a Muguruza in a semi-final, and then someone from down the bottom in the final. So I don't think it's the worst draw for her.
No.
Who have you gone for as your value pick? Did I just mention them?
Couple names in there. You can find my preview, tweeted that out with all of them. But the one I picked to talk about here, Karolina Muchova, she's 25-1. I think she has arguably the easiest spot in this draw. With the qualifiers placed, I don't love Anna Samova being there in the second round, but at that number, in that quarter, she kind of avoids a lot of the bigger names until later in the tournament when they might get knocked off, possibly have to withdraw or something like that. So really like her at this number, generally does well in these tournaments with bigger players. So a lot of value for her, 25-1 in my opinion.
Yep, that looks good to me. My value pick, I did talk up a little bit as we went through, is also, so I've gone for Coco. I think it's another good spot for her in the draw, as I said, around that Mertens, Svitolina kind of section there. You got Konta coming back, having not played as much recently. I think this is a good spot for her, and I would rather get involved with her in the outrights, I think, than the match-to-match.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Unforced error-wise, who have you gone for here?
Miss Simona Halep will be her first match back since her injury. For some reason, the market is pricing her like she's not just playing tennis, she's playing good tennis. We'll see what she does here. She generally gives her very best when she comes to play. So hope she's healthy, but going to kind of give her a pass and see how she looks this week.
Yep. And I've gone for the other player that has also withdrawn on me a number of times this year when I've backed them in the outright market, and that's Victoria Azarenka. Probably more keen on her getting towards Cincinnati and the US Open, if I'm being completely honest, but it'll be interesting to see how she goes here. Hasn't played as much tennis this year as I would have hoped in terms of kind of picking and confidently backing her, but you do need to keep an eye on her and respect her here, particularly in the pocket of the draw that she is currently in. Who's your overvalued player for the tournament?
Miss Garbiñe Muguruza. As I mentioned, a threat to win any tournament she enters, but it has been very up and down this year. She is the second favorite, right around 8-1, almost 9-1 certain places, which is hilarious to me. I would have her in kind of that pack of women that are between 14-1 and 16-1. She's in a tough spot in the draw. She might have to see Rybakina as early as the third round. If Pliskova is in form, that's going to be a tough quarterfinal. If Mahova's there, that's a tough quarterfinal. Maybe it's Sabalenka, maybe it's Badosa, someone else there. And she's still finally just in the final. She still has to play whoever comes out of the bottom half. I just think there's absolutely no value in that number.
Yeah, you've sold me. I don't think. Look, she's going to make us look silly one week in 5 or 6 or 7 probably.
At some point, I mean, she actually doesn't have that great of a history in North American hard courts, but has done well at the U.S. Open a couple times, so we'll see. But I'm happy to watch her win matches. I'm just not going to bet any money on her right now.
Yep, that seems fair. My overvalued player, and there's 2 parts to this story. My overvalued player is Bianca Andreescu, and I've said that a couple of times this year. She just hasn't played a lot of tennis. She's that type of player that needs to play kind of bursts and a decent chunk of tennis, but not too much that she ends up injured. And I think she's obviously been trying to find that fine line, I think, over the course of this year. I think that got interrupted a bit with her COVID positive diagnosis and then some issues, I think, pre-Roland Garros with quarantining and whatnot. So I think there's been more than enough reasons as to why she has perhaps underperformed for this year. I don't think she's value in this particular draw, and I think she's a little bit unders as the Canadian playing at home who's, back on North American hard court, and there's a little bit of hype around her, and I think her price is a little bit short. Having said that, my advice would be, I'm just going to flip the banner, if you want to back Bianca Andreescu to win the US Open, now is the time to do it. I don't think she hasn't shown a whole lot of form yet. She's sitting, I think, around that kind of 14-1, I think, ish kind of pocket.
Yeah, pretty much the same price she is here, 14, 15-1. You can find her.
But I think when you look at her and you look at the tennis that she's playing, I think because she hasn't played as much, I think the day off probably helps at the US Open. She's obviously performed really well there in the past, having won the tournament. And I don't think that price is going to come out a lot, even if she loses a couple of early matches here and in Cincinnati. I think the only way this price is probably going to go most likely is it's going to get shorter if she does make a run to a semi-final or does make a deep run and knocks off a big name somewhere. So I would be more inclined to, instead of backing her to win this tournament off not a lot of form, look for her to try and find some sort of form between now and the US Open. And I think you're probably going to get a good price for her then back on a court that she's shown a lot of success at in the past off, not a lot of years of tennis there. And she's going to get days off between her matches. I think that's probably that would be where I'll be going. But I think she's overvalued here, but I think then she's value at the current price looking at her for the US Open.
I like that. You know how much I love early futures, so I'm going to think long and hard about that because it's not a bad idea.
Sometimes I have good ideas. They're few and far between, but sometimes. Alrighty. Well, that about just wraps it up. We've covered off the 2 major tournaments for the week. Any last thoughts?
No, it should be a fun week of tennis. We'll see. I'm excited to have tennis back sort of in my time zone, be in a little bit of a rhythm. It should be fun. Again, make sure you check out my full women's preview so you can get all the outrights and stuff there. But hardcore tennis is back, so I'm happy.
That you are, and it should be a really, really interesting month ahead. Just if anyone, look, I should have mentioned this off the start. It's lockdown here, so I haven't got my hair cut, so I went for a beanie. This beanie, for anyone who's outside of Australia, is actually for fighting MND. It's not an endorsement of someone on Twitter. So I just noticed the word there. I should have like folded it over or something. It's not that type of endorsement. It's actually for a charity here fighting motor neuron disease. But I can see how that might look a little bit silly for the rest of gambling Twitter. We'll wrap it up there. Everyone who listens to this on the podcast is going to be really confused now, but that's fine.
It's okay. The
Thanks
account's
everyone for
locked.
tuning in. Exactly. Make sure you like, rate, subscribe, retweet, whatever it is that you can do via the medium in which you access all of this content. And hopefully we'll be back next week with the full 3 hosts. That would be quite the novelty if we can get our time zones and everything right. Can be a little bit tricky sometimes. And happy birthday again to Candace. I'm sure she's listening to us on her birthday. But hopefully she's had a fantastic day. And we will be back next week. Good luck for everyone. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch via Twitter.